Welcome back to Soundwell Guitar. Today's lesson is going to be on reading two notes at the same time. We're also going to get into how you would play those two notes using the apoyando stroke technique, because many think that this is too difficult to do and they opt to do a different technique. Well, I want to show you on today's lesson that it actually can be done and it is well worth the work. Okay, so reading two notes at the same time, kind of an intimidating thing to do. In fact, not all instruments can even play two notes at the same time, like trumpet, flute, the voice. We're only able to play one note at a time with those instruments, but the guitar can do, well, obviously can do up to six at the same time. This is what is known as a polyphonic instrument, where one that can only play one note is called a monophonic instrument. So it's going to be kind of a few big musical terms being thrown around in this lesson. Hopefully it doesn't confuse you. I just want to make sure that I cover them all and make sure that we know that we're speaking the same language, basically. Because here's another term that you'll want to be familiar with: double stop. I did not come up with that term, but that is the official name of a two-note chord. And two-note chord, right there, that is something I think some people might be argumentative on. It is technically believed that a chord is three notes or more, and so that any less than three, that is a two-note chord, really isn't a chord at all. I believe that double stops actually still act a lot like chords do, but I understand the logic behind that. But I just wanted to cover that some people think that they don't really, they're really not chords in their own right, and they'll just call them double stops, or another term would be a dyad. Okay, so a lot of different terms we could use for this. Basically, we're just playing two notes at the same time and reading them. Both in themselves are difficult to do. We'll start first with the reading aspect of it. Today, we're just going to be doing two notes at a time that are somewhat far apart. They'll call that a wider interval. Like when you got two notes played together, they call that a harmonic interval. And we're going to be doing them where they're really far apart. That is, like if I just played like the first and second string together, those are pretty close together. But I actually am going to be doing ones that have like the higher notes and the bass at the same time. So they're pretty far apart. And when we have that kind of double stop, using the apoyando stroke is always the best way to go, because it's a richer and warmer tone and it's louder. The guitar is really not a loud instrument. I mean, unless of course you get on a electric guitar with a Mesa amp or something. But I mean, like the classical guitar, the Baroque guitar is not a very loud instrument. And that's actually how it became popular, is a lot of the rich people would have parties, dinner parties, and piano was the popular instrument, but it was found the piano was just too loud and obnoxious in like a small dining room setting. And then the guitar became more popular because by nature it's a fairly quiet instrument. But since its popularity rised, luthiers have worked hard to get the guitars to be louder on their own, that is the acoustic ones. So we've got to do all we can to really get the best possible tone and the loudest tone out of it without it being abrasive or obnoxious. And in this case, when doing the double stops, we're going to do the apoyando technique. And what that technique is if I refresh your memory, the apoyando is when our finger goes into the next string after we pluck it. There's another technique that we have not covered yet in these lessons, and it's called tirando. There will be a lesson coming up where we actually get into the tirando technique, but it's good to have both techniques because they're good for different situations. There are some things that would use the tirando technique that I would never use the apoyando on. We'll get into later why the tirando is beneficial and for what, but today when we do these double stops, keep in mind it's the apoyando technique we're going to use and not the other one where we just simply pluck the strings and essentially our fingers don't go into the next string. Now I'm doing it really exaggerated. It's almost like my hands like a frog hopping up and down on the guitar. I've actually seen people play it like that. They just, I mean, that's a lot of wasted energy, that thing jumping up and down like that. We're actually going to keep the hand pretty still, and we're going to pluck the strings apoyando style. and our fingers are going to go into the next string. So here's a close-up of what this technique would look like. I'm just going to play two C's together at the same time. Notice my thumb dropped into the next string, apoyando stroke, and the other one did that. To do that at the same time, this is the technique that's in question. Should you do it like that? Because it's much easier to just do this. See that? Now, sometimes you might want to do that technique, which is something we'll discuss on future lessons. That's not apoyando, though. That's called tirando. Tirando is good for when you're doing notes that you want to ring out. Very, very helpful for that. So it's a legitimate technique. When we have something like this, there's those two C's again, it's a different dynamic. Touching the other strings is inconsequential because I don't need these to ring out. The ones I want to ring out are ones that I plucked and my fingers are not getting in their way at all. Doing this is easier, but it is not the best sound. It's okay, but it doesn't bring out the rich, warm sound of the guitar, and it is also not very loud. This is much better. You can take like the middle section of Leyenda by Isaac Albéniz. Perfect example. Another one that I think sounds way better when you apply this technique would be Capriccio de Arabe. More advanced pieces, of course, that I'm using to demonstrate it just to prove my point. But let's get on with how to actually do this technique. Just doing the two at the same time can just be tricky for some, and I think initially for me, I felt weird like pulling them together and landing in the next strings because I always felt like I was going to go like that or something. You know, like, and that might happen at first too. That's totally normal. But you start to get used to plucking them and going straight into the next string and just resting them there like that. I'm just doing different combinations here. As you can see by the close-up, it's possible to do it. And trust me, the sound may not come through real well on this microphone of mine, but the sound is much, much better than if I just went. It's just weak, it's thin. This is much better. So just work on doing that. You could do like maybe the two C's together and just practice playing those two together. Just hold it down with your left hand and alternating the index in the middle. So you get a really smooth, rich sound out of it. I remember first studying classical guitar, and I had some of my favorite players I liked to listen to, but because I didn't know a lot about the technique that went into it, I wasn't quite sure what it was that set them apart from a lot of the other players. The guitarists that I'm talking about are Andres Segovia, Christopher Parkening, John Williams. These were some of my favorite at the time when I was learning classical guitar back in the 90s. There have been a lot of great guitarists that have come out since then, but those are the ones that stand out for me. That when I listened to them, they just had a certain tonal quality that not all others had. I'd put on a CD from some other player, maybe a lesser known or whatever, but there was just something about their tone that wasn't as good. Thought maybe it was the recording, maybe it was the guitar. But later, once I started to learn how to play properly, I realized, no, it was the technique that the players were using. And this was a big one right here. Doing the apoyando stroke with double stops makes such a difference in one sound, and it really sets apart the amateurs from the professionals. So I got a few exercises here that we're going to do. I want you to keep in mind with every exercise, we do the apoyando stroke on the double stops. We also have our thumb covering all of the low notes. The top notes, let's use our index and middle, and let's alternate them. So it's always the thumb, but we're going to alternate the index and middle on the melody part. Okay, here we go. I'm going to count very slowly. All exercises should be played slowly. Here's exercise 1 in 3/4 time. And we're going to be doing combinations of notes that are very, very common in classical guitar music. So if at first it seems tricky or it just seems so foreign to you, stick with it. Like I said, there's only so many combinations, and these are some of the most common ones. The more you play different exercises that put these different combinations together, you start to see them repeating themselves, and you start to get more familiar with them, and then your hands just start jumping to the formations that they require. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Exercise 2, 4/4 timing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exercise 3, technically I did not write this. I based it just off of a holiday tune, Deck the Halls. Kind of fun, just to take the melody and then put this bass that moves underneath it. It's a little bit tricky, but makes it sound a little bit more interesting. Makes it sound a little bit more like the era that it came from. All right, here we go. Exercise 3, or Deck the Halls. Played very, very slow, by the way. 1, 2, 3, 4. Our last exercise on today's video does the same. It's all the same thing, double stops, a lot of the same left hand combinations, apoyando technique, and alternate the index and middle. The challenge now is we're going to be doing eighth notes in this one. So be sure to count and play very slowly, because it's going to move faster. And I don't mean a faster tempo, I just mean there's two notes per beat now. Exercise 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, that's it for now, just those 4 exercises. I encourage you to practice them until you have them down perfectly, getting through from beginning to the end without making any mistakes, alternating the index in the middle, and using the apoyando technique. As much as you might want to go away from doing that and just pulling your hand away, Stop yourself from doing that. You want to practice these things the correct way, because in the end, the result will be you have the best possible sound you could be getting out of your guitar. That's what you want. We'll see you on the next video.